Hi guys, welcome to the virtual session of TUS, and today we have Rohini Lakshane, who is a technologist and public policy researcher. She is the director of emerging research at the Bachao Project India. At the outbreak of COVID-19, a slew of mobile apps were released by different government bodies in India for the purpose of tracking quarantine or tracking cases. Today, she will talk about usability and privacy issue in government-issued COVID-19 apps. And maybe we can ask the questions about how we had certain privacy issues downloading these apps and feeding our information to these apps. So I will hand it over to Rohini, and please go ahead, and we'd love to listen to this today.
Thank you, Nishta. Good evening, everyone. So before I delve into the specific privacy or usability issues of these apps, some things that will frame the talk for today. Everything that I'm saying today is based on publicly available information. It's derived from government websites, government releases, or just information that's observable from the app stores. None of these apps have been tested independently by me. Including Arogya Setu, there are about 50 different apps on the Google App Store, which were released by different bodies of the Indian government, the state governments, union territories, to respond to the coronavirus outbreak in some situations. Some of them are meant for quarantine pacing, some are meant for providing information about government services, about hotspots, about curfew passes during the lockdown. So if Nishtha could just share the link to a spreadsheet which has information about apps.
That's right away. Also, guys, if you have any questions, please put it in the chat or in the comments, and we will start answering it. So at the end of the session, we will answer all of these questions.
Some of these, so this list only has apps that have been released by the government. There are some apps on the App Store that claim to be endorsed by the government, but it's not very clear if they really are, or they've been developed by private entities. There's one app by NIIT. They've not been included in this sheet because my analysis is entirely about government apps released in different parts of India by state governments and union territories. Now, health is a matter on the public health is a matter on the state list in India. While Arogya Setu has gotten a lot of attention, its privacy policy and its usability issues and user experience and so on, these apps were released much before Arogya Setu, and some of them were very quick responses issued by the government as the coronavirus outbreak was spreading way back in February or March. Governments needed to respond very quickly at the local level, and a lot of these interventions were a result of trying to contain the spread of the outbreak. After the lockdown was released, this was also used for issuing curfew passes to essential workers and so on. The article that has been shared in the description of this talk, which has been published on Citizen Matters, that's from early April, which is why it has about 16 different apps, including Arogya Setu. As we see that currently the list is about 50 apps. Almost all of them were released in the time between April and now by different state governments, union territories, and some of them by bodies of the central government, such as the MeitY or the National Informatics Center. So going ahead, yes?
I'm sharing the article from the Citizen Matters.
Thank you, Nishta. So going to the privacy aspect of this, patient confidentiality, that's the term that medical professionals use to indicate that the privacy of patients and their medical information is both important and is essential. Now, this is because if word spreads that somebody has a disease, whether or not it is serious or contagious, it may have consequences for them. For example, there could be stigma, there could be discrimination, there could be economic harm. We have seen cases of people, even in the coronavirus outbreak, of these people being fired from their jobs, even if they are just suspected cases, and they've not really been tested positive, people being thrown out of their rented homes by homeowners and so on. For the same reason, health data also enjoys additional protections and is treated as especially sensitive. It falls within an intimate sphere. It is something that literally pertains to life as well as death, which is why in most privacy and data protection laws, health data has additional protections. And for the same reasons, health data is of interest to criminals, to insurance agencies, to credit agencies, to banks, to surveillance companies, and so on. Now, any breach or leak of health-related data or a transfer to entities who are not accountable to citizens, since in these cases, citizens are giving away their data to the government. So a transfer of these data to any unauthorized entities or entities who are not accountable to the people, and elected government is, could cause a lot of damage. We know what happened with Aadhaar data. There have been instances of quarantine lists being leaked, coronavirus quarantine lists in different cities being leaked. There has been at least one instance of the government deliberately publishing lists of quarantined people, which included their names and their street addresses, that the specific addresses of their homes. This happened in Bangalore. About the data of about the identities and home addresses, about 19,000 home quarantined people was leaked, and the government's explanation was people were breaking quarantine rules. They were not taking it seriously. They were not staying at home for the 14 days for which they were staying at home. And the situation was unmanageable. So they released these lists so that other people who find them outside their homes can report them for violations. And other people were actually encouraged to find to report such people. So it is also cultivating a milieu of distrust and suspicion and turning on one another. India does not have an informational privacy or a data protection law, which means that there are neither safeguards nor redress mechanisms in case our health data or any other personal data that is gathered by these apps is leaked or abused. If you look at the detailed analysis I've done of about 16 apps way back in April, and also some of the newer apps that were developed, which is not in the article, in the analysis in Citizen Matters, many of them don't have a privacy policy at all, which means that there is either no mention of a privacy policy on the App Store, or there is a URL but which says privacy policy, but it does not have a privacy policy listed. It is a web page with something else, or it's a dead link or something like that. In some instances, the linked privacy policy goes to a third-party website. And while there exists some sort of a privacy policy over there, it's either generated using a template, or it's explicitly said that the policy was generated using a template. It is inadequate. It is vague. It does not have any safeguards. It does not mention any redress. It does not mention who is responsible or accountable for enforcing the policy. So very, very few of these apps have a policy that is adequate enough, and none of these policies have been studied as much as the Arogya Setu policy has, which still does not inspire confidence in a lot of people. But compared to these apps, Arogya Setu has a much more defined privacy policy. If you see in the spreadsheet, there are about 3 apps which which have been developed by companies that provide surveillance services to the government. So if you look for Pixon AI and Face Tagger, both of these companies provide video surveillance services. Face Tagger is a closed and proprietary software for facial recognition, which means that these companies are managing the apps, they are getting hold of the data. There is no oversight or safeguard over how they are using it, and these companies provide surveillance services to the government. So I leave it to you all to join the dots. Coming to the permissions that these apps ask for, they are, a lot of them ask for permissions that don't, on the face of it, doesn't seem necessary for the app to do its job. It's both the sensitivity of the permission, such as the device ID, which can uniquely identify a device, or if a phone call is in operation and the number to which the phone call is in operation, and so on. It is not very clear about why these permissions are being asked for, and it becomes even more problematic when third-party services have uploaded these apps to the App Store for on behalf of the government agencies, or they are managing the data obtained from these apps, the operation of these apps for the government. Two of those apps were pulled from the App Store at some point because they were replaced by Arogya Setu. So one was COVID 20 and the other was Corona Kavach, and we have no idea what happened of the people who had already installed these apps, or what happened of the data that was collected from these apps. Now, it is understandable that this was a fast evolving situation, and the government or various local governments were required to respond very quickly, and there was also lack of clarity, lack of a lot of confusion when rules changed quickly. Like there was like the lockdown that was declared at 4 hours notice, but even then, was there any thought or policy about how do we go about enrolling different kind of tech interventions in a scenario that at that point in time was fairly unpredictable? Coming to the usability issues, and these are all, as I said, points that have gathered from the App Store, reading the App Store, reading reviews from different screenshots, or reading how the app is functioning. In the case of quarantine management apps, only those who have registered on the App Store could use the app, which means that even if you install it, if you're not registered as a quarantine person, you will not be able to access the app. There were a host of technical issues going by the requests for help or going by the reviews on the App Store, which to me gave the impression that they prevented the users from meaningfully using the app, or they prevented the intended use of the app for whatever, ensuring that people stay at home during their 14 days of quarantine and so on. So one aspect was technical issues of the app. The other seemed to be process problems, like people who were still, who had completed the quarantine period were still getting automated messages about installing the app and registering themselves 3 days after the quarantine period was over. Apparently because the database of quarantine people had not been updated fast enough. There were also people who were quarantined but could not register themselves on the app because the database did not recognize them, their phone number. Everything was tied to the identity of the people. In most of these cases was tied to their phone number. So the app did not register them, saying that we don't recognize this number, it's not been registered yet. So this is possibly a process lag somewhere, that the details were not updated in the database where quarantine, which was being used for quarantine management. Now, amongst all the information that was publicly available, there was no information about what happens if there is technical failure. What happens if you are unable to update your status as somebody who's been put in quarantine? What happens if an app incorrectly identifies you as breaking the rules of quarantine? The usability of such a system, take for example, an app that requires you to take a selfie and upload it to convey that you are indeed at home. Now, this is contingent on the quality of your internet connection, the kind of hardware that your phone has, the kind of camera that it has, the kind of memory that your phone has. You're required to upload this at a certain frequency, let's say twice a day or every hour, and it would determine whether you are indeed following the rules or you're not. Now, what happens if there is what is called a false positive, which means that you are indeed at home, but for some reason the app has picked up a wrong location half a kilometer away from your home, and it has marked you as someone breaking quarantine. Or what happens if there is a false negative, in which case you are indeed somewhere else, but the app just does not pick up a change in your location. So these were issues that you could see posted in reviews or posted, or that could be inferred based on the information posted in reviews or complaints or requests for information from people who were using these apps. So again, no information about what happens in the case of technical failure. Are there complementary or alternative methods being used for monitoring people in quarantine, like physical checks? Most of the time, the response from the government was that if we give out too much information about these processes, people will game the system, which is, and people were already breaking quarantine rules. But when it comes to supporting people who were dealing with issues of technical failure or process delays, it was unclear about what exactly was happening. To especially take the case of an app called Quarantine Watch, issued by the government of Karnataka, and it's very interesting the way it is supposed to function. At one point in time, Bangalore had about 25,000 people under quarantine, and around the same time, an order was issued that quarantine people should install this app. And from 7 in the morning to 9 in the evening, they should take a selfie every hour. So that's 14 hours. So 14 selfies. They should take a selfie every hour via the app, upload it to the app. And there was a separate tender, so to speak, a request for procurement by the government, that they were looking for an operator who could derive the timestamp and the geolocation coordinates from these photos to be able to manage compliance to quarantine. So what was happening in this case was that they needed, this is somebody coming from a machine learning or a big data thought, that you have to analyze a lot of data for a lot of people, 25,000 GPS locations over 14 days. What was happening in this case was that somebody was supposed to take those 14,000 or whatever, 25,000 into 14 photos per day and extract GPS coordinates, timestamps, photograph from it, compare it to the photograph registered in the quarantine person's database, and try and see if they match. If they don't match, it probably meant that the person had broken quarantine rules. Now, let's say if somebody has a bad camera, or if, let's say, the lighting in the background is off, there is a chance that the photo of the same person is recognized, is not matched. That is, it's not recognized as belonging to the same person. What happens in these instances? Absolutely no information about how these cases were being handled. If there were these cases, and we are dealing with huge numbers. So it's, this particular app was a fascinating study. There was another app like this that asked people to submit their selfies. There were at least two different apps apart from Quarantine Watch by the government of Karnataka that asked people to submit their selfies. One of them asked it twice a day. This is also a very intrusive rule to ask people to submit a selfie every hour for 14 hours a day to determine their waking hours and sleeping hours. In terms of handling of this data, most of the apps are have been uploaded by, say, the revenue department or the home department or the IT department. It's never the health department. Now, in the case of the Karnataka apps, for example, there are about 3 or 4 apps from Karnataka. These apps were being used to locate people who were in quarantine. So the home addresses of these people were marked on a map. Which meant that whichever government department is handling GIS, which means handling the mapping of the earth, was operating these apps, not the Department of Health or the Department of Home. Now in Karnataka, land records are managed by the Department of Revenue, which is why most of the Karnataka apps were for COVID quarantine monitoring and other services were being handled by the Department of Revenue and not the Department of Health. Or that's what it seemed from the way it had been put up on the App Store. So that was a gist of the different issues of usability, of user experience and privacy of these 50 odd apps that currently exist on the Google Store. I don't have a count of the apps on the Apple App Store. Can we open the session to questions?
I have one question, Rohini.
Yes.
So what about, like, a lot of these apps then can be manipulated in many ways. You know, people can still post certain selfies while they're out and it can be still believable. Like,
yes.
How do, like, then at the end, what's the point of these apps and how are we, like, I have still not downloaded Arogya Setu, knowing that, like, my details can be shared, my privacy can be violated. And I've just, like, I was asked to, but I did not. I was just like, I'm not going to participate in giving my information to these apps. So, but it seems like it is the need of the hour. There has to be some way it needs to be tracked, and people are left to be on the basis of trust. So how does one go about it? Should we set up ourselves or not? The tracking is important at the end of the day.
It is. And a constant complaint from public officials was that people are not taking this seriously. People did not take the threat of the spread of coronavirus seriously. They did not follow quarantine rules, which is why they had to resort to a lot of drastic measures. It is true that many of these apps can be beaten. So as a countermeasure, one of the apps had the provision to upload a selfie only if you took it from the camera. So you have to upload it in a certain time range and you have to take it from your camera. You cannot upload a photo that's already on your phone.
There has to be a timestamp,
which to some extent will prevent people from taking photos or gaming this arrangement in any other way. But the
Okay, I think
there was a glitch over there. But the fact remains that it's possible for these systems to be beaten. One way is to, of course, counsel people to run public information campaigns that, this is not good, which the government has done. The other is measures like, say, surprise checks, which could be in person or which could be via the app itself. Instead of collecting a selfie every hour, if you tell the person who's been quarantined that we will ask you for a selfie at a random time of the day, and you have to respond within 20 minutes. If you don't respond, which is a lot more efficient, which uses a lot fewer resources than some of the measures that we've already seen, like collecting these 14 selfies and getting an operator to then cull out data from those selfies and then match it against a database and see if it matches, and then using that to determine every single day if somebody is breaking quarantine. An easier method is to just say that we will make random checks, we will make surprise checks. But that's also deterrence, because you don't know when a random check is going to happen. This may have been a human power issue, that they don't have enough police personnel, and they were whatever forces the government has were already being spread too thin. But there's still a smarter way, and that's my opinion of doing this. Of course, there will be people who manage to beat the system. There will be some degree of pilferage, but that's one way of looking at it.
Got it. We have another question. Someone's asking, is Arogya Setu legally mandated still, or can it be uninstalled now?
So it's currently the directive is on a quote unquote best effort basis, which means that people cannot be forced to install Arogya Setu. Although there are some services, even private services, or let's say hotels or those kind of entities that are demanding that people install Arogya Setu, and if they don't install it, they will not serve their customers. So it's not, in theory, it's not legally mandated, but it is still in use in some places where people have to install it, otherwise they cannot access certain facilities or services.
Wasn't it like in Arogya Setu, users' location information like purges every 30 days? And
that is what
the
was
user,
said.
if the user deletes the account, all the information will be deleted after 30 days too.
This was what was said in the privacy policy. But for the longest time, we didn't have the code. Now, in theory, the client-side code, that is the code of the app that can be installed, has been open source. But we don't know if the code that has been released as open source is the same code that is of the app. If it's the same version, and if it's the same code. We also don't have the server-side code, which means the counterpart of the app with the government, or whichever entity has volunteered to run it for the government. We don't know what's happening on their side. So there's no way anybody can independently verify if what is being claimed is being done. And there are, of course, separate issues of, who's accountable. Like, it says the data is being purged, but how do you know if it's being purged? And if it's not being purged, who do you hold accountable? What do you do? There's no, currently, like I said, even though privacy is identified as a fundamental inalienable right, we don't have a privacy or a data protection law. So where do you go if things don't work as they are supposed to?
Got it. There's another question. Did Kerala government also deploy an app, and how did that work?
There are a few apps. So if you look at the spreadsheet, where there are a few apps from by the Kerala government. One was merely informational. It did not ask for, it was not for quarantine management, and it did not ask for a lot of information. It was just meant for giving people information about the situation, providing updates, providing information about medical services, or even about medical services. There was another app by the administration of Kannur which provided mental health counseling, and so on. There is an app that was released by the Kerala Police Department, but I've not studied that in as much detail to comment anything at this point.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I think that's about it. That's all we have for questions. Thank you so much, Rohini. It was, I still honestly, I'm still confused right now to go on these apps or not, but sounds like it is important and it's been left on trust and of the user who's downloading it. So I guess that's it. And guys, if you have any questions, you can leave it in the, you can send us a message on Instagram on Das page or on Facebook. I'm also sharing the information for our next week's session. We will have Gur Sahibad Grover, who will cover the legal background of, he will cover the censorship and the freedom of expressions on the internet in India. You can join in next week on Monday at 7:30 p.m. You can also donate us on the link I'm about to share here. If you need any links to what Rohini discussed, we will be happy to share it with you, and you can just drop us a message.
Nishtha, I can see there is a question which says, what is the conclusion and the way forward? Thank you for asking this. What can be done in this case? The elephant in the room is that there is no law to protect our privacy, and that law has been in the works for nearly a decade. So we need that law. Apart from that, let's say if the government is outsourcing the development and operation and maintenance of an app to a third party, let's say a software developer, or in the case of the two surveillance companies that I described, there should be an RFP, which means that there should be technical requirements of what is needed from the app or whatever technical intervention being planned. There should be transparency in procurement. So IT procurement is, whenever an app is made, not just about Corona, but there was a previous study I did about public safety apps, which was, even in those cases, you don't know who's the developer, how accountable they are, what is their liability, how are they holding the data, when will it get deleted, how long are they holding it, what if there's a leak, who's responsible for abuse. There should be transparency in procurement, and after something has been procured, after you give the contract to a developer or whatever private entity, how will they be held accountable and responsible? We need rules and policies for this before the next pandemic or whatever next requirement for having these sort of technological interventions.
Thank you. Someone just saying that there are a lot of good ethics discussion going on Indian journalism of medical ethics. Public health professionals are actively debating ethical frameworks for thinking things like quarantine through, and they've shared a link if you want to check it out.
That's a useful input. Thank you very much for having me over.
All right, thank you guys. If you still have any questions, please feel free to we'll be happy to help you.
Nista, there is a question in Q&A box.
Yeah, another question is, I think the specific reference of a Kerala government was about the sprinkler app from a US-based company. Is going that route the best option, as there are strict data privacy agreements, although all through India?
I'm afraid I'm not aware of this app or the specific Kerala app that you are referring to. So I cannot comment on this.
There's another question where like, but do you advise people to download the Aarogya Setu
app? I'm afraid that's not in the scope of this discussion, but I would be happy to take the question offline.
All right. I guess that's about it. That's all we have for questions tonight. Yeah, so that was it, guys. So join us next week for another session brought to you by DUS. You can support the cause. I've shared the link online. And that's about it. Thank you so much, Rohini. These were like our constant questions to understand how should we download it, and it is still left to a personal basis, to individual, where we should give our information or not. But there are glitches. There are privacy issues, and you can manipulate the data clearly. And thank you for sharing your information and your research on it with us tonight.
Thanks for having me over. Good night, everyone.
Thank you, Rohini.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Nisa. Thanks so much.
Thank you.